Hello and welcome to Media7, recorded before a live audience at Auckland's Classic Comedy Club. In this week's show, we'll talk about disability in the media and ponder strong language with a panel of swearing experts. Language may offend, seriously. But first, the news media typically entreat on the side of law and order. So why would journalists actively refuse to help the police? That's the case at the moment, as 5 journalists from TV3's Campbell Live, including host John Campbell himself, resist a police bid to force them to give evidence in a possible prosecution of suspects in the theft of medals from the Waiouru Army Museum. Campbell, you may recall, conducted an interview with one thief, named only as Robert, that was controversially reconstructed to protect the man's identity. So where does right lie in such cases? I'm joined now by Tim Pankhurst, the Chief Executive of the Newspaper Publishers Association. Welcome, Tim. Now, I don't want to discuss in too much detail a case that is still before the courts, but why is this happening? Didn't the Evidence Act 2006 explicitly protect journalists' right to protect their sources?
To a point, and yes, why indeed? I mean, here's a case where the medals in question have been returned. Nobody's life is at risk. 2 people have been charged with theft and are due to come before the court again in October. And here we have this case, which is a unique case in this country, where journalists who traditionally have the right to protect their sources, but it's not an absolute right, are now facing a decision from the Chief High Court Judge, Justice Randerson, as to whether or not they have been summoned and whether or not they should be compelled to give evidence.
And now, in making its case, the Crown said something quite interesting. They said, what's really at stake here, as if there wasn't much to protect. I rather wonder whether that's a question that could also be turned around on the Crown itself.
Absolutely. I mean, what's really at stake here is the media's right to report freely, to protect its sources, and to keep the state and its agencies, keep them honest.
So should journalists say no as a default when they are asked for evidence by police in these circumstances?
Look, I don't think so. I think a lot of these things are, there are grey areas, and look, I don't think it's an absolute thing. There are a lot of cases where the media assists the police, and you see them regularly publishing pictures of criminals and so on, and which is very effective. And if a protected source, an assurance was given to protect a source, but then the journalist became aware that somebody's life was at risk, there might be some sort of terrorism event, that sort of thing, then I think you would argue that the journalist was bound to reveal what they knew. But I don't think that applies in any way in this case at the moment.
So there's no general benchmark, it's a case-by-case thing?
I think so, and as you said, the Evidence Act, in the end, it does provide some protections to journalists, but it is really grey, and it's finally up to the judge to decide. The judge is beholden to look at the public interest, and I would suggest here that the public interest is not being served by taking this action against TV3.
How often does this happen, that the police challenge it to this degree? When was the last time this happened in New Zealand?
Look, as far as I'm aware, the last time that journalists were compelled to reveal sources was way back in 1977, when the then Dominion political editor Richard Long and his offsider Richard Neville revealed details of the budget, and Muldoon tried to compel them to drag them before the Privileges Committee and tried to compel them to reveal their sources. They were only facing banning from the House and from Bellamy's for a few days. But in this case, it's much more serious. If John Campbell and the TV3 people stick to their guns, then they could be charged with contempt and they could be jailed.
And you're actually someone who can speak on this, because you were, in a different context, in danger of that very thing yourself, weren't you, when you were editor of the Dominion Post? Yes,
unfortunately. The Solicitor General, of course, charged me as then Dominion Post editor and Fairfax with contempt for publishing the so-called terrorism trials. But the Solicitor General was at pains to say that he was not going to seek a jail sentence or a fine against me personally. But that was quite a stressful and demanding process to go through. I think that was a misuse of public resources, and potentially we're looking at another one.
There will be people who will look at this and say, this is journalists believing they're above the law.
Yes.
What's your response to that?
Yes, there will be people who say that, but there's a principle at stake, and I think it may well be a case of the police have been embarrassed by the fact that TV3 was able to present this evidence, and I wonder if there isn't a little bit of face saving going on here.
Do you think this is going to be seen as a precedent? This is the first time it's happened since we've had this new Evidence Act. Is this going to be a line in the sand?
Yes, I think very much so, and I think you hear the phrase a chilling effect, and this has the potential to very much curtail what journalists can do in protecting sources. And I think if this proceeds in the way that it's shaping, then journalists in the future will need to say to people, look, I cannot guarantee that I will be able to protect your anonymity.
And that means not getting the story, potentially?
It may well, yes.
Who sticks up for journalists in these circumstances? Obviously, John Campbell's employer seems to be behind him. Is there anyone else there?
Well, I mean, hopefully the public will, because, ultimately they're going to be affected if the media is curtailed in this way. And I imagine that if it ever proceeded that far and John Campbell was in fact facing jail, it will be marvellous for his profile and TV3's ratings. But of course, these things aren't done for that. But I think that they would be able to marshal quite a strong groundswell of public opinion, just as we saw in the contempt case with the terrorism trial. So,
just in summary, there will be many journalists in this country looking at this case with a great deal of interest.
Yes, indeed. Justice Randerson, is a respected judge, and I imagine he will be having quite a wrestle with this one. And I hope that he comes down with the right decision. Well,
we'll see what happens. Tim Pankhurst, thank you for your time. Now, after the break, we look at disability in the media. But first, Simon Pound looks at a sticky success story.
Sticky Pictures are a Wellington outfit that have made some breakthrough art shows. You may know them from such early work as The Living Room.
It definitely sort of appealed to the general public more than just sort of artists. I think the stories about people that were doing art rather than art, you know what I mean?
That's Mark Elberston. His vision for the company has led to a slew of awards, including one recently for Best Format for The Gravy. And they've done docos too, like The Magical World of Misery.
My name is Misery. I'm a character artist and designer.
But these pretty awesome shows are not what we're here for. Mark and creative partner Louis Sutherland have been making some stunning short films.
We're both childhood friends. We grew up together on the Kapiti Coast. We kind of got into trouble together, and now we're sort of making movies about that. The first short film was taken from Louis' life and his family, and the second short film was taken from my life, and it's the sort of day when I ran away from school sort of inspired the movie. And I get chased down by bullies, and they sort of beat me up a little bit.
Both the first film, Run, and the $6.50 Man are magic stories from recognisable New Zealand childhoods. And these personal stories have met worldwide success.
We took them both to Cannes. The latest one went to Cannes this year, the $6.50 Man, which won a prize, which was great because we won the same prize when we were in Cannes back in 2007.
That's right, honourable mentions at Cannes.
You get to think that you know a script or a film or a scene really, really well. But then when you show it to someone who speaks a different language from another side of the world, they appreciate different moments. And I always find that really moving, that we can whack out little scripts and anecdotes from, our history on the coast, and people over in Cannes worth $40 million find it interesting.
Off the back of this double success, they are now working on their first feature, Shopping, which is already generating interest from the Cannes jury.
They're like, when are you going to do your feature? And we want to see it first. We don't care whether you are past the submission date, sort of thing. So, yeah, we're in with as good a chance as any, I think.
But until they get that made, you can catch the $6.50 Man as part of the homegrown MIC section of the International Film Festival that's on now.